Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sports Today. Qualifying for the Japanese Grand Prix has just concluded, and in case you're wondering how that's the case, well, it's an Asian race, so that means the timings, if you're, of course, in the Indian subcontinent, is a lot better than what it would normally be if it's a European race or especially a race in the Americas. So the good news is, of course, that we get an early morning start. So timings are pretty good for us, easy to watch. And if you're a Max Verstappen fan, it would have been an even better qualifying session for you guys because, well, Max Verstappen ended up taking pole position despite actually not improving on his lap time going into the final round of laps in Q3. Now, obviously, it's great news for Verstappen because you know that all Verstappen has to do is actually win the Japanese Grand Prix and get the fastest lap of the race, and that would have sealed the 2022 title for him. Of course, there is a small caveat that has to be added. There was a bit of an incident in Q3 at one point wherein Verstappen was on the track and his car suddenly moved to the left-hand side, and Lando Norris was behind him and kind of zoomed past him, almost crashed into him. So that is going to be investigated by the stewards. So whether or not there's any penalties there, we don't really know. So Verstappen's pole position is, of course, dependent on whether or not he's not given a penalty in this case. But as things stand, he has in fact taken pole position. He's taken pole position ahead of both the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, who are second and third respectively. Rounding out the top two for the front two grids is, of course, Sergio Perez in the second Red Bull. So it's good news for, of course, Red Bull fans that Verstappen is ahead and Perez is there right abouts in the vicinity in case he needs to actually overtake and then maybe defend for Verstappen, because of course we know for a fact that with Verstappen all he needs is a race win and the fastest point, and it doesn't matter where his rivals finish. The equation for Verstappen, as I said, is simple, but this qualifying was pretty interesting because it threw up quite a few, new contenders in the midfield. Now, we've all known for a fact that Alpine, the works team of Renault, have been having a pretty good season this year. They've, pulled clear. They had, in fact, till recently pulled clear in the race for the fourth position in the Constructors' Championship. Unfortunately, they didn't have the credits of Singapore Grand Prix, and because of that, McLaren have slightly gone ahead. But this time around, both of the Alpines looked on point in the Suzuka circuit. They looked very, very fast. In fact, at one point, Alonso was was looking good enough for actually getting a spot in the front row or at least the second grid. That didn't happen, but Alonso does end up getting a P7 and he splits both the Mercedes cars. Hamilton is in 6th and Russell is in 8th. In 5th is Esteban Ocon, who, as we remember, has gotten his new teammate at Alpine for next season. It's been confirmed that Pierre Gasly, who of course is currently at AlphaTauri, will be joining Alpine from next year. But it's a good sign for Ocon that he could manage to out-qualify Alonso this time around, get that very important P5, and so both Alpines look set for good points positions. The rounding off the top 10, you have Sebastian Vettel, who we know is going to be racing for in Japan for the final time this year, and top 10 is Lando Norris. He ended up getting P10. Behind him is Daniel Ricciardo. He looked on pace in the early parts of the qualifying, especially Q1, but in Q2 just couldn't find the pace to actually make it into Q3, so he's 11th. 12th is Bottas, 13th is home favorite Yuki Tsunoda, Guan Yu Zhou is behind him in 14th, 15th is Mick Schumacher, whose future in the Grand Prix series is of course up for debate right about now. He hasn't been confirmed for Haas for next year, and there's been no signs that they might actually be going for him. There's a rumor that they're looking to prefer someone like Nico Hulkenberg. Whether or not that happens is something we'll only know in due course. Alex Albon in the Williams 16, Pierre Gasly, who again, as I mentioned, got his drive confirmed for next year at Alpine. 17th, he and Yuki Tsunoda were both struggling with some brake-related issues, and they were constantly talking about that over the team radio as well. In fact, Gasly sounded very unhappy in an interview that he did with the broadcasters too. Said that these sort of things, they can happen, but it's very, very frustrating when it does. Neither of the AlphaTauris unfortunately looked on the pace. Kevin Magnussen in the other Haas is P18th, Lance Stroll 19th, and to no one's surprise, the driver 20th is Nicholas Latifi. So anyway, quick highlights if you talk about just how it went in qualifying. Again, it was always going to be between the two Ferraris, so whether it was going to be Max or Leclerc, whoever got on pole That was obviously going to be the thing, the main battle. Outside chance, obviously, for the likes of Sainz and Perez, but as expected, it's Verstappen first, Leclerc second, Sainz in third, and Perez fourth. The big surprise and probably the biggest takeaway from this particular weekend's qualifying is just how good the Alpines looked. Again, as I stressed on the fact that this year they have been looking very very good at most circuits. They have a speedy car. Their chassis and engine integration has worked, and they've also improved their power unit this season around. So it's not that much of a surprise. But the fact is that they are now actually consistently challenging for qualifying finishes in the top 10. So that's a good sign for Alpine, and of course it's a good sign for both Ocon and Gasly, who will be driving for the team next season. If they can, of course, improve on this showing next year, they might actually be regular contenders for podium finishes. So that's the good news there if you're an Alpine fan. And of course, if you're someone who is a supporter of the Aston Martin team, you'd be very very happy to see Seb where he was. Of course, in general, considering the fact that Seb is retiring, most people would be wanting to see him do well. So obviously, it's a plus that he managed to make it into Q3 this time around. Because again, if you note for a fact that if you know Seb's record, then you know for a fact that he's had a very very good record in Japan. He's won here 4 times. 2 of them, in fact, came in the Fuji ground, in the Fuji circuit, but 2, of course, have come in Suzuka. So he's obviously someone who enjoys this track, and there were a lot of Seb fans out there in full force. So it was a good thing for him there as well. All in all, a good qualifying session. Although, to be fair, aside from the Alpines finishing where they did, it was along expected lines. But that doesn't, of course, take anything away from whatever happens tomorrow in the race. So I'll just take a couple of your comments. So Abhishek says that Max might be champion tomorrow. That's right. If he gets the fastest lap and of course wins the race, then it doesn't matter who finishes where, he will in fact be champion. Rahul Bhira says, I was asking me to talk about the FIA budget cap restrictions. That's an interesting thing, and the result rather. So the result actually, Rahul, we'll only know today is October 8th if I'm not wrong, and we'll know it by October 10th. At least that's what the FIA said. We were originally supposed to get to know the results of the budget cap breaches for 2021 of course October 5th. That didn't happen. They pushed it back a bit and they said October 10th. Now there's nothing stopping them from pushing it back again, but hopefully that's something that we'll get to know sooner rather than later. We'll be tracking, in fact, that story as and when it happens, so don't you worry about that. And of course there are other comments as well. I think that's it as far as the comments go. So thank you guys all so much for joining us. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very excited about the race tomorrow. I always have been a big fan of the circuit in Japan. The track, for a fact, is shaped like an 8. It's very very speedy. It's very very challenging on the drivers, but the drivers love it, and they love it because it challenges them so much. So I'm looking forward to the race. The best part, of course, is that it will be happening at a pretty good time. So you wake up in the morning and you can just put on the F1 on TV. I'll certainly be doing that. I hope you guys will be doing that, and then joining us here on Sports Today tomorrow to talk about the race after it ends. So for now, I'm taking your leave, but thank you all so much for joining us, and don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and tap the bell icon so you know when we're going live or uploading a new video for you guys. Then you can go ahead and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. Thank you all so much for joining us, and don't forget to download the Sports Tech app, by the way. For now, I'm taking your leave, so goodbye for now.